Let me start with a question that might sound provocative on purpose. What if the gods of ancient civilizations were never meant to be worshipped the way we imagine, but to be understood? I'm not claiming secret knowledge, and I'm definitely not saying I have final answers. What I am saying is that when it comes to Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, the simplified version most of us know barely scratches the surface. So let's talk, calmly, openly, about Quetzalcoatl, not as a cartoon god from a textbook, not as an exotic myth, but as an idea that once shaped how an entire civilization understood life, death, knowledge, and even time itself. Quetzalcoatl comes from Mesoamerica, especially the Toltec and later the Aztec world. His name literally means feathered serpent. Already, pause there. A serpent belongs to the earth. Feathers belong to the sky. This isn't random symbolism. This is synthesis. Heaven and earth, matter and spirit, instinct and intelligence. Sound familiar? If you've ever encountered the serpent in the Garden of Eden, the Kundalini serpent in Indian philosophy, the dragon in Chinese mythology, or even the double helix of modern DNA imagery, you're looking at variations of the same symbol. Different cultures, different eras, same obsession. The snake as knowledge, transformation, and dangerous wisdom. Now here's where we break a common assumption. Quetzalcoatl was not primarily a warbad. In fact, in many traditions, he opposed human sacrifice. He was associated with learning, priesthood, calendars, agriculture, and civilization itself. He was the bringer of maize, the teacher of writing, the organizer of time. Ask yourself something uncomfortable. Why do we tend to remember violent gods more clearly than intellectual ones? Chronology helps here. Quetzalcoatl appears very early, long before the Aztec Empire reached its militaristic peak. Among the Toltecs, he is remembered almost as a philosopher king, a civilizer. Over time, like many divine figures, his image shifts, myths harden, power structures adapt him. He becomes more contradictory. This isn't unique to Mesoamerica. Look at how Zeus evolves from a sky principle into a political ruler, or how Yahweh transitions from a storm god to a universal monotheistic deity. Gods change when societies change. So let's not freeze Quetzalcoatl in one version. One of the most fascinating myths says Quetzalcoatl helped create humanity by descending into the underworld, collecting the bones of previous worlds, and mixing them with his own blood. That detail matters. Humanity is not created for the god, but from the god. Divine sacrifice, not divine command. Now take a step back and compare this with science, not to force a match, but to notice patterns. Modern biology tells us life is recycled. Elements forged in stars become bodies. Death feeds life. Nothing is created from nothing. Everything is transformed. Myth and science aren't enemies here. They're using different languages to describe the same intuition. Another myth says Quetzalcoatl is associated with Venus, the morning star. Venus disappears and reappears in the sky, cycling between visibility and absence, death and rebirth, light descending into darkness and returning again. The Maya tracked this with terrifying precision. This wasn't superstition, it was astronomy embedded in story. Here's the taboo question. Were these myths primitive, or were they sophisticated frameworks for understanding a complex universe without equations? Because when you strip away the costumes and feathers, Quetzalcoatl looks less like a god demanding worship and more like a symbol of consciousness evolving, knowledge that uplifts but also destabilizes, a reminder that wisdom isn't safe. And this is where the story turns almost cinematic. There's a legend where Quetzalcoatl is tricked, shamed, and ultimately leaves, sailing east on a raft of serpents, promising to return. Later, when the Spanish arrived, some Aztecs allegedly believed Cortés might be Quetzalcoatl returned. Historians still debate this, and they should, but the deeper question isn't whether it literally happened, it's why the myth allowed for return in the first place. Why would a god leave and come back? Because Quetzalcoatl isn't eternal domination. He's a cycle. Knowledge appears, transforms society, disappears, and returns in another form. Think about it. How many times has humanity rediscovered lost knowledge? Mathematics, astronomy, philosophy, even democracy. Rise, fall, return. This is where I want to push you, gently but firmly, into research mode. Don't stop with popular retellings. Read the Codex Borgia. Compare Mesoamerican cosmology with Egyptian Osiris myths, or with Prometheus stealing fire. Notice how often knowledge comes at a cost, and ask yourself something most people don't. Why do so many myths warn us about wisdom instead of celebrating it unconditionally? Because Quetzalcoatl isn't a comfort god, he's a challenge. He represents the tension between instinct and intellect. The serpent crawls, the bird flies. To unite them is powerful, but unstable. Maybe that's why later societies leaned more heavily into gods of control and fear, because knowledge makes people harder to govern. So let me be clear about my own limits here. I'm not saying Quetzalcoatl was an alien, or a lost scientist, or a misunderstood historical king, though you'll find people arguing all of that. I'm saying the symbol itself is doing heavy cognitive work. It's teaching through image, not instruction. And that's something we've largely forgotten how to do. So next time you hear feathered serpent, don't imagine a monster. Imagine an equation written in myth. Earth plus sky, body plus mind, survival plus meaning. And then do what Quetzalcoatl myths quietly encourage you to do. Question, compare, observe, and most importantly, don't outsource your understanding to authority, ancient or modern. Because the most dangerous idea in any civilization has never been violence. It's been knowledge that knows how to grow wings.